Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Got a viewer suggestion for a video regarding topwater colors, and more specifically, when I like to throw certain colors. And the reality is, there's a handful of colors I throw, but I try to keep it pretty simple. One thing with a topwater bait that you hear people talk about all the time is that, well, the fish don't see the full bait. So most topwaters, when you look at them, a lot of people say, well, the only thing that really matters is the bottom of the bait. And I tend to agree with that to a point, but I also want to point out that a lot of times when you do have a topwater bait that has different colors on the side, depending on the bait, it will roll side to side. And from that standpoint, you'll get a little bit of flash of a different color. And if it's a contrasting color, that can be a very, very good thing. But having said that, I'm not looking at this from the standpoint of, what's the best looking bait that's got 14 colors in it. Generally, it's more of a hues thing for me. Is it a translucent bait? Is it a opaque bait? Is it bright? Is it dark? To me, that's more important than like the true specifics of a color. Whereas if you're throwing something like a crankbait or a jerkbait, there are a lot more nuances that go into color selection, in my opinion. So we're going to break these down for you. I'm going to kind of walk you through when and where I like to throw certain colors. And hopefully it helps you catch a few more fish. Before I do get into that, though, I want to remind you I do have a Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. So if you want to support the channel, please use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. I'll put that in the video description. And I also do a bunch of lake breakdowns for fishthemoment.com. So I look at lakes throughout the country. I try to break them down based on season, provide a whole bunch of waypoints that will help you catch more fish when you go to those lakes. They're a really good starting place for you. So you can check those out. That'll be in the video description as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about color. So the first thing I want to point out, anytime you're looking at a topwater bait, I think it's important to recognize, is it a translucent bait, meaning you can kind of see through it, or is it an opaque bait where you've got a solid paint job like this Chapo right here is an opaque bait. If you've got translucent baits, generally I like to use them much more when I'm talking about clear water. If I'm fishing a place where you've got clear water and you're actually trying to blend in with the surroundings more and make your bait less visible, which can be very, very important if you're talking about spotted bass and smallmouth specifically, I'll look to use a translucent bait with the same hues that these colors are that I'm going to talk about. If I'm fishing dirty water, and by dirty, I'm generally talking about anything that's got, I'm going to say 3 feet of visibility or less. Generally, I want to go with opaque baits. Now, that doesn't mean in super clear water, I won't throw an opaque bait. If it's low light conditions, I still think at that point, an opaque or solid colored bait can be good. But if you're talking about fishing in topwater during the middle part of the day, which a lot of people think you can't do and is very, very underrated, that's when I'll go with the translucent baits. So once I've determined if I want an opaque or translucent bait, that's when I'll start looking at color selection. So I really keep this pretty simple. Let's just talk at first about more of your white colored baits, bone, pearl, anything that's more of your white shade. This to me is very much all about forage. And topwaters generally are very, very much about forage. So if I'm fishing in a fishery that has a lot of shad in it, that's when I'm going to look to throw my whites. I think white is very, very good at mimicking a lot of your shad species. And if I'm fishing relatively off-colored water, that's when I'm going to throw a bone or a white-colored bait. Again, this for me is about fishing shad. So if I'm talking about any time from like the shad spawn through the summer months, and I've got a lot of shad around, which is going to be primarily down south. Like to me, down south, white is much better than it is up north. Now that doesn't mean you don't catch them up north, but up north here is when you start talking about a much more of your bluegill and panfish related forage. Because of that, I generally, if I'm fishing on a place where I know the fish are feeding on bluegill, I will switch to a bluegill colored bait. Now this doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a north versus south thing. If I'm fishing around bluegill beds down south, or I'm fishing during the spawn, when the bass are on beds and a lot of bluegill around, that's when I actually prefer a bluegill colored bait regardless of whether if there's shad or not in the lake. Now that's if I'm fishing shoreline related stuff. So if I'm up here in the North Country where we don't have much shad at all, if I'm fishing around bluegill spawn, if I'm fishing around bass spawn, bluegill is going to be one of my absolute go-to colors. Just the killer color. This is the MF bluegill color that Berkeley makes in the Chapo. If I'm fishing down south or around a bunch of shad, for primarily a big portion of the year, if not all of the year, whites are going to be a major player. Now, that doesn't mean if the bass are spawning that I won't throw white. And what I mean by that is if the bass are spawning and I'm fishing the bank and fishing around where there's bass spawning or there's bluegill beds, that's when I will throw bluegill. But at the same time, on a lot of lakes, while bass are spawning, you've got schooling bass that are offshore in the middle of the lake or middle of creek arms. That's when I would throw the white or more of a shad colored bait. So those are the two primary ones. Now, black to me is very, very important when you're talking about fishing topwaters. Black is really good for a couple of reasons. One, it shows up really well in the water and it creates a really good silhouette on the surface, which allows the fish to track it. You know, a lot of times what you're talking about with topwater baits is the shadow that these baits are creating that allow the fish to really key in on it. Well, if you've got a black bait, it only creates the darkest shadow possible at that point because you have less sunlight penetration to it and the bait itself is black. So black is really good in low light conditions. It can be really good in your clear water conditions, and it really shines, in my opinion, in the second half of the year, more so after once September hits. I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like the fish track black baits really good later in the year. It's when it becomes a much better player. Don't have a huge reason to that, other than it just seems like there is a good period where fish start feeding again on topwater baits. A lot of fish are moving in from deeper water, starting to move shallow once the water temperatures cool off. And black just seems to perform really, really well. So, you know, if I'm night fishing, I'll look for black. If I'm fishing really dark conditions, low light conditions, I'll go black. If it's late in the year, instead of throwing, say, a white colored bait, a lot of times I'll pick up the black. You know, in the same situation, a lot of your Ozark lakes are this way. You know, I feel like the bluegill colored topwaters are really good in the spring, but as the fish start progressing, you get past the bluegill spawn, instead of throwing bluegill, I'll throw the black one. And then the last color that a lot of people want to talk about a lot of times is chrome. Chrome to me is a very, very specific situational bait. I've talked about it on the channel before. A lot of people disagree with me on this, but to me, chrome can be a negative. Chrome baits on a sunny day can really deter the fish and spook the fish. So I'm not going to throw chrome if I'm fishing along a shoreline or shallower water where I think I can potentially spook the fish. Chrome to me is specifically a bait for schooling fish, and it doesn't matter if they're schooling on shad up north or they're schooling on alewife on the Great Lakes. This to me is more about matching the hatch. So if the fish are really keying in on your chromey colored species, the chrome can be good, but it's gotta be deep water as well. And by deep water, generally that means I'm fishing schooling fish. So I'm either waiting for them to come up and break and bust around me, or I'm just casting areas where I know there's a bunch of bait. But I just do not think chrome is generally a great color for just going down the bank and fishing areas where maybe I'd be throwing a bluegill colored one, because the fish are not keying in on big chromey species. Now, I will say I've had some really good days on chrome, like I said, on the Great Lakes where I know smallmouth are keying in on alewife. I've had really good days where they're keying in on Cisco, and I've had really good days where I'm talking about shad colored fishery or shad forage fisheries down south for spotted bass and largemouth and smallmouth, and places like the Mississippi River in the fall where the fish really start keying in on some of your bigger shad species. A chrome can be really good on the wing dams, but it's definitely, for me, more about schooling fish to throw a chrome bait. The last thing I'll add, and this goes back to how I started this video talking about, you know, how you can have these big, beautiful colored topwater baits, but the fish don't get to see the majority of it. One thing I really do like to do if I'm fishing spotted bass or if I'm fishing smallmouth is to use some sort of bright colored fluorescent on the bait. I think a lot of times that can help generate baits. And I'm not necessarily saying I want to throw, you know, an entire walking bait that is chartreuse, but a lot of times I'll take a chartreuse marker and just put a nice stripe down the bottom. A lot of times I'll put just a big circle around one of the hooks of like fluorescent orange or fluorescent pink or chartreuse. I feel like it triggers a lot of the spotted bass and smallmouth into becoming aggressive, and it gives them a target. And from that standpoint, it can be very, very good at times. But I try to keep the topwater simple. I think for the most part, the colors, the cool colors in topwater baits can be a little bit more appealing to the angler than to the fish, and it helps sell baits. But mostly you want to be paying attention to the overall hue and color and look of the bait versus like the specific colors in itself. But these are the ones I really like to throw. Keep it pretty simple, and it seems to have worked out for me pretty well to this point. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully it answers the viewer question. If you've got other colors you like to utilize, throw in the comment section so other anglers can learn from you as well. I'm sure they'd find that beneficial. Otherwise, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Stay tuned, we'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.